The winter of 1945 had a way of making everything feel sharper than it should. Cold hunger, fear, even memories. To Anna Keller, the world beyond the barbed wire might as well have been a distant universe. She stood with the other German prisoners in the compound yard, their thin coats rattling in the wind like defeated flags. Snow gathered along the hems of their trousers and skirts, and the sound of boots crunching across the frozen ground echoed like dull drums of judgment. Rumor traveled faster than the wind in places like this. Someone had whispered that American officers were conducting inspections of the new POW arrivals, harsh ones. Searches, interrogations, stripping dignity the way winter stripped warmth. No one knew which parts were true, but fear didn't need precision to thrive. Anna clutched her elbows, trying to hold herself together. Her fingers were stiff, red, cracked. Once she had been a university student in Munich studying literature like life depended on metaphors. Now she was a prisoner number A173, wearing a wool coat barely thick enough to be called fabric. Next row, an American guard barked. The line inched forward. Anna's chest tightened. She wasn't afraid of physical pain. She had already endured hunger march's loss. She feared humiliation. She feared being seen as less than human. Prisoners said American soldiers hated them. Some guards kept their distance, some glared, some muttered insults under their breath. Anna learned to brace herself for the worst. It was easier that way. Still, she lifted her chin. If they were going to strip her dignity, they would have to fight her for the last of it. A gust of wind swept past the yard, carrying with it the thick smell of smoke from the mess hall. On another day, the scent might have reminded her of home, her mother's potato stew, the warm kitchen windows glowing against Bavaria's dark winters. But today, it only reminded her she hadn't eaten since dawn. "Keep your head down," whispered Marta, the prisoner next to her. Anna had met her 2 days earlier, a seamstress from Hamburg, 40, maybe 50, a quiet woman with trembling hands. "I won't bow to them," Anna murmured. "You think pride warms you?" Marta shook her head weakly. "Cold doesn't care about pride." Anna didn't answer because her jaw was shaking too much. The cold pressed through her bones like it was trying to carve new shapes from them. The inspection tents loomed ahead, 3 khaki structures flapping against the wind. Guards came and went like silhouettes. From this distance it was impossible to see what was happening inside. Some prisoners emerged pale, some angry, some oddly relieved. The uncertainty spread through the line like frost silent, creeping impossible to escape. 10 more steps. Anna inhaled deeply, trying to steel herself. Then a shout cut across the yard. "Keller Anna." Her stomach dropped. A guard with a clipboard motioned sharply. "You, this way." She was pulled from the line. Marta watched her go with wide, frightened eyes. Anna's thoughts raced. Why separate me? Did someone report me? Did they mistake me for an officer's daughter? Do they think I know something? But the guard didn't explain. He simply led her toward a smaller tent separated from the others. A solitary tent. A worse fate, her mind insisted. Inside, the air was warmer only by degrees. A lantern hung from a rope, casting thin gold light over a wooden table, a metal stove, and a soldier sitting on a crate with his sleeves rolled up. Anna froze. The man looked younger than she expected, mid-20s American uniform, a face carved from angles, softened by fatigue, not cruelty. He rose when she entered, and she instinctively braced shoulders rigid. "Your name's Keller?" he asked, voice even. She nodded tightly. "I'm Sergeant Daniel Hayes." He flipped through a sheet of paperwork. "You were separated from the main group because your intake form is incomplete." Anna's pulse quickened. "Incomplete, how?" "Relax." His tone wasn't unkind. "It just means we're missing information. We need to confirm your details." Nothing more. "Relax." Easy for him to say. Her gaze darted covertly around the tent. No shackles, no instruments, no officers. Still, she didn't trust it. Hayes motioned toward the chair by the table. "You should sit. I prefer standing." He studied her for a beat. Not impatient, not irritated, just studying as though assessing whether pushing her would do more harm than good. "Suit yourself," he said finally. He ran through the standard questions: name, date of birth, occupation. When he reached that part, Anna hesitated. "Student," she answered. "What field?" "Literature." His brows lifted slightly as if the answer surprised him. Any family still living?" She flinched before she could hide it. The sergeant's voice softened. "You don't have to answer what you don't want to." She wished that helped, but the cold was gnawing at her, now leaking into her bones, until her whole body shivered uncontrollably. The tent wasn't that much warmer than the yard. Without movement, the cold settled like a predator. Hayes paused mid-question. "You're freezing." "I'm fine," she snapped automatically. "You're not." The shivering worsened. Embarrassment pooled hot beneath her skin, at war with the cold. She hated looking weak in front of anyone, especially a soldier in the uniform of the country that now held her fate. Hayes stood abruptly, reached behind him, and pulled something from his cot. Anna's breath caught. A blanket. A thick olive-green army blanket. She straightened defensively. "I don't need—" He held up a hand. "Ma'am, this isn't an order or an insult. It's a blanket. You're freezing. That's all." He stepped closer and draped it gently around her shoulders before she could protest. The coarse wool almost burned with how warm it was compared to her skin. She inhaled sharply, surprised by the surge of heat and the unexpected sting in her throat. Her voice came out small. "Is this standard procedure?" He shrugged. "It's my only blanket." Anna stared at him, stunned. She didn't know what to do with her hands or her pride, or the sudden confusion shaking her more than the cold. "Why?" she whispered. Hayes didn't answer immediately. He scratched the back of his neck as if searching for words that wouldn't sound foolish. "Because war's done enough damage," he finally said. "Doesn't need help from me." Something unfamiliar tightened in Anna's chest. Gratitude tangled with disbelief. 100 memories rushed through her, the chaos of bombings, the sharp whistle of incoming shells, the weight of losing her father, her brother, the home she used to write poems in. All she had known lately was survival and sharp edges. This moment felt impossibly gentle. Hayes returned to the table, trying to appear occupied, as if giving her dignity by not staring. She realized with a jolt that he truly meant it. He wasn't pitying her, mocking her, or using kindness as a weapon. He simply refused to add to her suffering. "Thank you," she said quietly. He glanced up, eyes meeting hers. "You're welcome." For the first time in months, Anna didn't feel like prisoner A-173. She felt like a person. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the tent walls. But inside, a fragile warmth held its ground, a wool blanket, a soft lantern glow, and an American soldier who had chosen humanity when cruelty would have been easier. Anna tightened the blanket around herself, not just for warmth, but because something about it felt like a promise. A small one, a quiet one, but real. And for the first time since being captured, hope, a timid flickering thing, breathed inside her ribs. The blanket stayed around Anna's shoulders long after her shivering eased, long after her mind stopped buzzing in that dazed, fragile way that followed prolonged cold. But even as warmth seeped into her bones, she couldn't shake the disbelief. A U.S. soldier had given her his only blanket, in a POW camp, where comfort was a rumor, where kindness was rarer than sunshine. Sergeant Daniel Hayes was bent over the table again, writing something on her intake sheet with deliberate strokes. His handwriting was surprisingly neat for a military man, orderly, almost academic. She wondered if he had gone to college before the war, or if the war had taken him straight from youth to uniform, like so many others on both sides. She watched him cautiously, unsure whether to speak or stay silent. She felt like she was holding something delicate, an atmosphere, a fragile balance she didn't want to disturb. "Your form is complete now," he said without looking up. "So I can go?" He hesitated. "Yes, but first you should warm your hands." She blinked. "My hands." "You're still shaking." He nodded toward her fingers, which betrayed her even as she tried to hide them under the blanket. She curled them quickly into fists. "It is winter." He huffed a soft laugh. "That's not an answer." Anna opened her mouth to retort, but stopped. Not out of fear, out of a strange growing awareness that this man was not trying to dominate her or belittle her. He was noticing. Seeing her humanity, not her uniform, not her nation, not her prisoner number. The realization made her chest tighten. "It's just cold," she said quietly. He stood and approached the small stove in the corner. He opened the iron door, adjusted the wood inside, and coaxed the fire with practiced efficiency. The flame brightened, casting the tent in warmer shades of gold. Anna drifted a little closer without meaning to. The heat spilled over her like a tide. Hayes stepped back to give her space, but she noticed that he angled himself toward the colder side of the tent, almost unconsciously shielding her from drafts. "Better?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes." Silence settled, gentle, not awkward, the kind one could rest inside. Then Hayes asked, "Do you want to tell me what you thought this inspection was going to be?" Her stomach clenched. "No." He lifted an eyebrow. "That bad?" She hesitated again. Her instinct told her not to reveal anything. Vulnerability was dangerous. But something else, a thin thread of trust, pulled her toward honesty. "Rumors," she said finally, "that American soldiers, that the inspections could be cruel." He didn't flinch, but his jaw tightened. "Some soldiers mistreat prisoners. It's the truth. War brings out the worst in people." And the best she asked before she could stop herself. He gave a faint smile. "Sometimes, when we let it." Anna didn't know how to respond. Her hand slipped deeper into the blanket, gripping the wool like it was an anchor. Hayes glanced at the clip of papers again, then set them aside. "You'll be assigned to the main women's barracks. Meals are strict, roll calls even stricter. Don't get in trouble with Lieutenant Harris, he's by the book." By the book meaning strict. By the book meaning the book is his personality. Hayes smirked. Anna's lips twitched despite herself. She had forgotten what it felt like to almost smile. But the warmth broke when Hayes added more gently, "The camp is safer than where you came from." She swallowed. "That does not mean it is safe." For now, he agreed quietly. "It is safer with that blanket around you." She looked down at it, thick wool olive green, smelling faintly of smoke and winter. She knew what it meant for a soldier to surrender a survival item. Blankets were currency. Protection, warmth, rest. And he had given his only one to a woman the world had told him was an enemy. "You should take it back," she said abruptly. "No," he answered before she finished speaking. "You will freeze." "I won't." His tone left no room for argument. "Then you are lying." "Probably." He shrugged. "But I've survived worse nights than this." Anna shook her head. "You should not." "It's not a debate," he interrupted softly. "Keep it." The gentleness of the command, not the command itself, silenced her. Hayes picked up his gloves and tucked them under his belt. "I'll walk you back to the barracks." Her instinct snapped. "No, I don't need escorting. It's procedure." "It wasn't procedure 5 minutes ago." He exhaled, amused. "Fine. Then consider it courtesy." Courtesy. She almost laughed. Months of brutality, evacuations, bombings, and captivity had taught her the world had run out of courtesy. Yet here it was, wearing an American uniform and offering her his blanket. He gestured toward the tent flap. After a heartbeat, Anna followed. Outside, the world slapped them both with air as cold as broken glass. Night had fallen hard, the sky a dark field stitched with thin stars. The camp's lanterns glowed along the pathways, casting long shadows across packed snow. Prisoners trudged between barracks, heads down, breath rising in clouds. Guards marched their routes with rifles slung at their sides. The camp buzzed with quiet misery, exhaustion, dread, longing. The air itself seemed heavy with unspoken grief. As Anna walked beside Hayes, she felt the eyes of other prisoners on her, on the blanket around her shoulders. A few eyes lingered too long. One woman frowned with confusion. Another narrowed her gaze with envy. "Does this make things harder for you?" Anna asked suddenly. "What thing?" "Being seen walking with me, giving me this." She gripped the blanket. "Will other soldiers think you are sympathetic?" "I am sympathetic." "That is not what I meant." "I know what you meant," he said simply. "And no, they can think what they like. I'll sleep fine." She studied him. "You are very strange for a soldier." "Good." They continued through the snow. When they reached the women's barracks, a guard outside glanced up. "All good, Sergeant?" he asked. Hayes nodded. "She's cleared." The guard stepped aside. Anna tightened the blanket. Hayes spoke quietly. "They'll do morning roll call at dawn. Don't be late." She nodded. "And Anna." She froze. He had said her name. Not Keller, not A-173, not prisoner. Her name. She met his gaze. "You don't owe me anything," he said softly. "Not gratitude, not trust, not conversation, just stay warm." She opened her mouth closed. It opened it again. Words scattered in her throat, none of them fitting. Finally she managed, "Good night, Sergeant Hayes." He dipped his head once, then turned and walked back into the cold hands, bare coat, thin breath curling into the night. She clutched the blanket tighter. Inside the barracks the air was stale and cramped bodies huddled on bunks stacked 3 high. But Anna felt something strange, like she had carried a small flicker of fire in with her. Not just physical warmth. Something else. Something dangerous and fragile. Hope. As she crawled onto her narrow bunk, drawing the blanket close, she whispered to herself words she hadn't dared think in months. Maybe not everyone wants to hurt me. Maybe not every enemy is my enemy. And somewhere across the camp, in a tent barely warmer than the wind outside, a U.S. soldier lay awake without a blanket and didn't regret it. The blanket became a quiet controversy long before Anna realized it. By the second morning, the other women in the barracks had already drawn their conclusions. Some thought she was favored, some whispered she was being used, some envied her warmth, others resented it. But no one said anything openly, not to Anna's face. They only watched her, some with curiosity, some with superstition, as if she had stepped out of some myth rewritten by war. Anna kept her head down. She wrapped the blanket tight every night and folded it neatly every morning. She never flaunted it. She barely even looked at it. But the camp was its own ecosystem built on rumors starved of truth. A small kindness could feel like a scandal. On the morning of the 3rd day, Hayes found her at the perimeter fence during her assigned labor shift. She was sorting firewood with 3 other women when his shadow stretched across the snow beside her. Keller. She straightened instinctively. "Sergeant Hayes, you're needed for translation duty." The other women looked up startled. Translator Anna had never mentioned speaking English, not loudly enough for anyone else to hear anyway. She followed Hayes away from the stacks of wood, feeling the weight of the stairs behind her like cold fingers. "How did you know?" she asked once they were out of earshot. "You muttered something under your breath in English during the inspection." Her cheeks warmed. She didn't remember that. "I put in a request," Hayes continued. "We've got supply manifests from a German depot. They're disorganized and the lieutenant wants them sorted, and you recommended me." "Yes." She blinked. "But why?" "Because you're the only one in that barracks who can read English German and handwriting that looks like it was written by a drunk sparrow." She couldn't help it. She snorted lightly. Hayes smirked. "See?" Almost a laugh. "I did not laugh." "You almost did." She shook her head, annoyed at the warmth blooming in her chest. "I don't need special treatment." "This isn't special treatment," he said simply. "It's work. Just different work." They reached the administrative tent. Inside it smelled of ink-damp wool and the bitter scent of weak coffee. Papers covered the table like snowdrifts. Anna took one look at the disordered stacks and understood immediately why Hayes had sought her help. "This is a disaster," she murmured. "Exactly." He handed her a pencil. "We need this translated, reorganized, and logged." She sat and began sorting through the sheets. Handwriting varied from elegant loops to jagged scrawls. She read quickly, narrowing her focus to the work. Hayes watched quietly at first, then turned to his own tasks. Hours passed. For the first time since captivity, her mind felt useful, needed. She wasn't just prisoner A173. She was Anna Keller, again student, scholar, reader of texts older than empires. At one point, Hayes brought her a tin cup of hot water. No tea leaves, just heat. "You work fast," he said. "I read fast. You also frown when you're concentrating." She looked up sharply. "Do I?" He nodded. "Right here." He pointed to the small crease between her brows. She quickly smoothed it with her fingers, flustered. "That is from the cold." "No, it's from frustration. You get a different crease when you're cold." Her breath caught. How long exactly had he been studying her? Before she could answer, Lieutenant Harris entered the tent with his usual storm cloud expression. "What is this?" he demanded, looking straight at Anna. Hayes stepped forward. "Translation duty, sir. She reads English." Harris eyed her like a hawk assessing a smaller bird. "Where did you learn University of Munich?" she answered evenly. "Literature." "That explains nothing," Harris muttered. But after glancing at the organized stacks she had already created, he added grudgingly, "Keep her on it." He left without another word. Hayes exhaled. That went better than expected. That is better? Anna lifted an eyebrow. For Harris? Absolutely. Again, something like a smile flickered between them. They worked until the sky outside dimmed to slate gray. At sunset, Hayes cleared his throat. You should get back before roll call. She began gathering her things, then hesitated. Sergeant Hayes. Yeah. Why are you doing this? His expression softened into something unreadable. Doing what? Being kind. He sat slowly on the edge of the table. Because someone once told me kindness doesn't lose wars, it only ends them faster. That sounds idealistic. Then maybe I'm idealistic. Are you? Maybe? A faint smile. Or maybe I'm tired of what cruelty has done. Anna lowered her gaze. She understood that too well. She tucked the pencil into the stack of papers. I should go. Hayes opened the tent flap for her. Snow drifted in, settling quietly on the ground. As she stepped out, he said very quietly, You're doing good work, Anna. The way he said her name made the cold air feel warmer than it should. That night in the barracks, she couldn't sleep, not even with the blanket pulled over her shoulders. Every time she closed her eyes, she thought of Hayes watching her work, of the subtle softness in his voice, of the way he had remembered the crease in her brow. Other women whispered around her. She ignored them. But she couldn't ignore the truth forming inside herself. She trusted him. Not blindly, not completely, but more than she had trusted anyone in months. It scared her more than the cold ever had. In the following days, translation duty continued. Whenever she entered the tent, Hayes was already there, pencil tucked behind his ear, greeting her with a nod that was almost a smile. Their conversations deepened gradually, naturally, like snow piling in layers. He told her he grew up in Missouri, loved baseball, hated the taste of Army rations, and had an older brother who'd enlisted before him. She told him she loved Goethe, missed the sound of church bells in Munich, and feared she'd never see her mother's garden again. They argued over poetry, once American versus German romanticism. She insisted German verses were richer, deeper. He argued American poets were more honest and raw. She accused him of being biased. He accused her of intellectual snobbery. Both smiled through the entire debate. Something warm and perilous grew between them, something neither spoke aloud. One afternoon, while they worked quietly, Hayes reached into a small crate beneath his cot. I've been meaning to give you this, he said. He handed her a folded sheet of paper. What is it? She asked. A letter, he said simply. One I never sent. Her breath caught. To whom, my brother? She opened it gently. The handwriting was unmistakably his, orderly, precise. The words were raw, honest, weary. He wrote about fear, about missing home, about doubting the righteousness of war while still fighting it. Anna felt her throat tighten. Why give this to me, she whispered. Because you're the first person I've talked to in months who listens like the world isn't falling apart. She looked up at him. He looked back, quiet, searching, unguarded. Slowly she folded the letter and handed it back. He shook his head. No, keep it. I want someone to have it. Then I should give you something too, she said. She hesitated, then reached under her thin mattress that night and retrieved the only possession she had carried with her through the marches, through the capture, through the cold. A page from her journal. A single poem she had written about the night Munich burned. She brought it to Hayes the next day. This is mine, she said. One I never meant to share. Hayes read it in silence, line by line, slowly, reverently. When he finished, his voice was rough. Anna, this is beautiful. It is terrible, she whispered. It's beautiful because it's honest. They exchanged letters the way soldiers exchange tokens, quiet, symbolic, dangerous in their own way. Letters they never sent. Letters no one else in the world would ever see. Letters that made them something more than guard and prisoner. Something fragile, something impossible, something real. That night, as Anna wrapped herself in the blanket, their blanket, she realized, she wondered how two people divided by war uniforms and barbed wire could possibly walk the same path. And yet every day it felt like they were taking one step closer, toward something neither dared name, not yet, but soon. The last week of winter arrived with a strange stillness, as if the wind itself was waiting for something. The war had been officially over for months, but the camp still felt suspended, caught between past violence and an uncertain future. The women whispered of release, of repatriation of ships that would eventually take them home. No one knew when. No one dared hope too loudly. Anna kept herself busy with translation duty, sorting manifests, deciphering handwriting, and most dangerously spending hours each day in the same cramped tent with Sergeant Hayes. Their conversations had grown deeper, but also softer, more careful. Each of them aware that whatever existed between them depended on time they did not own. Every day could be their last. Every morning, roll call could be the morning she was sent away. She felt the ticking of that invisible clock with every glance, every shared smile, every quiet hour spent working side by side. And then, one cold morning just before dawn, the inevitable arrived. Anna woke to shouting outside the women's barracks. "Roll call. All prisoners outside. Bring your belongings." Her stomach twisted. The women stirred, groaning, moving slowly until someone whispered, "It's happening. They're sending groups home." The barracks erupted into frantic motion. Anna grabbed the blanket before she even realized she had moved. It was instinct now hers in a way nothing else was. Outside, snow drifted down in delicate flakes. Prisoners lined up trembling, not from cold but from anticipation. Guards shouted names, grouping prisoners in batches of 15. Some were sent back inside. Others were marched toward the main gate. Each decision felt arbitrary, like fate shuffled in a deck of cards. When they called Keller Anna, her heart stopped. "Group B," the officer announced. "Prepare for transport." "Transport, home." The word hit her like a physical blow. She suddenly realized she didn't want to go, not yet. Not without. She scanned the yard. Hayes wasn't on duty. Her chest squeezed painfully. She couldn't leave without seeing him. She couldn't bear the thought of simply disappearing from his days after everything they had shared: letters, warmth, trust, the unspoken thing that had grown quietly between them. She stepped out of line. A guard barked, back in formation, but Anna was already moving, blanket clenched in her hands. She sprinted toward the administrative tents. One soldier tried to stop her. She ducked past him. Another shouted her name. She didn't care. The cold burned her lungs as she ran, boots slipping on the ice. She reached Hayes's tent and shoved aside the flap. He wasn't there. Her breath trembled. "No. Looking for someone." She spun. Hayes stood just outside, coat unbuttoned, gloves forgotten somewhere, expression taut with worry. "Anna, what are you doing?" he demanded. "You'll get in trouble. They're sending Group B home." His face changed instantly, shocked, then wounded, then quietly devastated. When he asked, "Now?" For a moment, neither moved. The war had taken so much from both of them, family safety dreams. And now, when peace had finally come, it was taking this too. This fragile connection, this impossible boundary-defying bond. Hayes stepped inside the tent and closed the flap behind them, shutting out the shouting and snow. "How long do we have?" he asked. "Minutes," she whispered. He exhaled shakily. "Then say what you need to say." She shook her head. "You first." He looked at her the way he looked at the letters he wrote, honest, unguarded, painfully sincere. "I don't regret a single thing," he began quietly. "Not the blanket, not the translation duty, not the hours we spent talking when we should have been asleep." His voice faltered. "You made this place bearable. You made me remember the world isn't just uniforms and orders." Her throat tightened. "You made me remember I'm alive." He took a step forward. So did she. "And Anna," his voice cracked, "I don't know what happens when you leave, but I needed you to know." She pressed her hand over his, stopping him gently. "I know," she said. He exhaled, shuddering. She reached into her coat and pulled out the poem she'd written, the one she had given him once, the one he had read slowly and reverently. But this time she had added a second page, a new poem, a hopeful one. "It's yours," she whispered. "Same rule as before. Don't send it." He took it carefully as if it were glass. "Then take something of mine." He reached into the crate and pulled out the blanket's matching tag, a small cloth label from his duffel bag with his name, rank, and regiment stitched in faded thread. He pressed it into her palm. "So you don't forget me," he murmured. She held the tag tightly. "I won't." Outside, someone shouted again, "Group B, move!" Anna's breath broke. She stepped toward Hayes. He hesitated only for a heartbeat, then closed the distance. Their foreheads touched first, quiet, trembling, reverent. Then his hands came to rest on her arms, not holding her back, not holding her tight, just holding her, memorizing her, as if he wanted to keep the feel of her through every winter to come. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were wet. Hayes swallowed hard. "Will I ever see you again?" Anna looked at him, really looked the man who had given her warmth when she had none dignity, when she thought it lost humanity, when she no longer believed in it. "Yes," she said softly, "because we survived the same winter." He blinked, understanding slowly. "Yes," she repeated. "You'll find me." It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a fantasy. It was possibility, thin, delicate, but alive. She turned before she could break again. "Halt!" a guard shouted. She paused. Hayes stepped forward instinctively, but she nodded, signaling she was fine. She walked back toward Group B, blankets still wrapped tightly around her. Not his anymore. Theirs. A symbol of the strange mercy that had existed between two strangers on opposite sides of a war. As she reached the line, she heard Hayes call her name. "Anna." She turned. He stood tall, snow falling around him, like pale ash. "Stay warm," he said. She smiled, a real, unguarded smile. "With your blanket," she answered. Hours later, as the trucks rumbled toward the horizon, Anna held Hayes's tag in one hand and the blanket around her shoulders. Behind her, the camp shrank into a blur of fences and guard towers. Ahead of her, home waited ruined, uncertain, but hers. But in her heart, something else waited too. A sergeant from Missouri. A letter never sent. A poem about hope. A winter survived by two people who should never have met, but did long enough to change each other. Years later, in a crowded train station in Munich, long after the war had turned to memory, Anna would look up and see a familiar face walking toward her. But that is another story. This one ends with a blanket, a name stitched in thread, and a promise carried through time. Not by war, by mercy, by forgiveness, by two people who learned that humanity survives where hatred fails.